You must like the subject a lot because it's going to be an hour and a half, and I am an academic, a professor. As you recall from your days at Professor, very boring to watch it for an hour and a half. You have to endure it, especially after lunch. But if it becomes a little bit boring, is this bothering you? Because it's going back and forth. Let me see if it's not working. Because if it works, it would be fantastic. If it doesn't work, I'll use this one. Go. Well, I'm not used to holding one hand because I feel I have to sing if I hold the microphone like this. Anyway, it's really my pleasure, and I should say this session is a little bit different from these excellent sessions that I've attended yesterday and this morning. Most of the sessions are really very futuristic, telling us what is really we should be expecting about the e-commerce, about the Internet of Things, about data, big data. And it's rather ironic that as an academic, I'm going to come and talk a little bit about what has happened up to now and what the research tells us. That's really what I've chosen to speak about. We give maybe some examples of some companies that have done this. But I feel that it's a nice complement between what we have been hearing in this conference and perhaps what I would suggest to you this afternoon. I do hope that if there are any questions or interactions, we would have time and place to raise your questions and we can discuss it. So, the subject is how do you implement lean practices in factories and also in supply chains. Let me start with some more basic questions. If you look at any supply chain, there are two basic questions in every supply chain. First, how good is every step? And by the way, another thing that you're going to look to see the difference between somebody that prepares his own slides and other presenters that have had designers and fantastic people to help them. So don't expect very high quality slides or pictures or all those fancy things that you have seen in the last day and a half. So I chose this one from a brewing from beer supply chain. So we go all the way from crops to consumption, and in fact recycling. There's the crop processing, there's production, the breweries, there's distribution, there's consumption, then recycling, and removal and disposal, which I haven't been hearing too much so far today, yesterday. But it's a big issue for many companies, and it's certainly a big part of the supply chain. The second question is, how good is the total supply chain, the end-to-end supply chain? Now, what I'd like to suggest to you is that the relationship between these two things are not really obvious. In fact, you can be sure that it's not sure that if every step is good, the end-to-end is good. And I'll try to expand on this a little bit more. Well, first of all, let's define what's good. Well, everybody has been talking about cost efficiency and speed, of course. These are very important criteria. But as we have been hearing it, there's also the question of agility, how fast the supply chain or the factory can react to quick disruptions or respond to the changes that it needs in the short term. This question of sustainability, we are now looking much more, I've noticed that it's occupying a lot more attention by a lot of people. The question of sustainability of supply chain, I'm sure everybody here has been working on this, but particularly for the food companies. By the way, if I go a little bit too fast, raise your hand or something so that you can catch up, if anybody listens to this. There's both question of sustainability of all the way going to the supply of food, the farms, for example, the supply of fish, supply of coffee and everything else, all the way to, of course, the recycling and everything else. What's the carbon footprint of the supply chain? There is also another element that I put into this category for the moment, and that's the question of ethical supply chains. How ethical is the supply chain? The question of use of labor laws, child labor, corruption. Events like the Rana Plaza in Bangladesh raised many questions about how, for example, the apparel was made by different companies. So there's a whole, that's that dimension of supply chain that is becoming much more important. Then there are also two other dimensions that I'd like to suggest to you. How aligned is the supply chain? This is one of the most toughest managerial challenges. Even in the same company, sometimes the alignment between the factory and the distribution and sales and procurement is not there, let alone if there are different parties involved in this. How to get the alignment right is really a huge, huge challenge. And then finally, the adaptability, the question of how the supply chain can react to more gradual changes. And this is, for example, this labor cost in China is growing. Therefore, if you're thinking about your supply chain in your Procter & Gamble or your Mars, how would that affect, if in fact it's partly done for export? How would you change that? How much can the supply chain react to medium terms changes? And by the way, another thing I should have said at the very beginning is that my talk is not as much about China, it's much more about China in a global context. So I really don't have that much personal knowledge about China. You guys are the expert in here. So let me just jump to research. This is an academic, it's not an academic audience, so let me just jump to conclusions. Research shows that if you push cost efficiency too much in the supply chain, every one of these measures suffer, including the cost efficiency itself. So there is some lesson to be made in here about exactly what is the right balance of activities in here. If you don't mind, I'm going to take my jacket off. There's a lot of heat in here. There's what this really says, that there is a lot of, as in our academic jargon we talk about, local optimization at the cost of global optimization. In more common terms, it's very easy in the supply chain to be penny wise and pound foolish. You could save a little bit on the manufacturing side, which is creating enormous amount of cost on the distribution or on the procurement. This is true at the very high level, and this is true even for very micro level at the supply chains I've observed. Maybe I should take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about something that was in the news. China daily today, I read about the tankers companies, the shipping companies that are merging. That industry, for example, to me is always very perplexing. Right now, we are building not the tankers, I'm talking about containers, I'm sorry, container ships. We are not, the largest container ship, as you might know, is now 18,000 containers. Maersk Line in Denmark owns quite a few of them. I'd like you to think about the 18,000 containers on one ship. It's about 400 meters long and about 55 meters wide, and actually I've been to one of them. If this was a train, it would be about 150 kilometers long. If you put one container on one car, it would be about 100. It just gives you an idea of what it takes now. One of these ships come, it's extremely expensive to build, extremely expensive to manage where the containers should be, on which rack and so forth. They go to a port, all the ports in the world right now are in an arms race to deepen the channels and to build dry docks. This morning we heard from the lady, Ms. Zhang from IBM, that Port of Cartagena in Colombia is using their system so that they know what to do with these containers. everybody else is doing it too. And then all the roads are really completely clogged. The cranes, everybody is spending a lot of money on cranes. Everybody's raising the bridges so that these ships could come in. Panama Canal is expanding so that these ships from the 13,000 containers could go to bigger. So you start wondering about, why are we doing all this? How much is the saving of transporting stuff from China to, let's say, Port of Los Angeles, is saving us to pay for all this? Somebody pays for all of these things here. And somehow this push for economy of scale is moving up. So that's at a very high level. As I said, you can go to very small levels and micro levels, you see very much the same phenomenon is going on there. I'd be more than happy to talk about the maritime, because it's really is amazing how that industry is moving so far. Every step of it is moving in the wrong direction. I have to tell you one more story. I go to Brazil a lot. The biggest port of South America is in Santos in Brazil, and it handles most of the economy of Brazil, but it's choking the economy. And Brazil is in deep trouble right now. But even when it was not in trouble, it was choking the economy of Brazil because it cannot handle the shipments, the trade. There would be minimum 25 to 30 kilometers of trucks waiting to get to the port. Now, you can imagine this is enormously costly. And you wonder why people are spending here and not going into more hand-to-mouth operations. Anyway, I got off the subject a little bit. Let me move on back to this. Yes, it's very simple to be penny-wise, pound-foolish in the supply chain. Even very smart people make that decision. What do the superior global manufacturers do? What can we learn from the best ones? Well, many of them, they try to implement lean practices in every unit, and they try to control the end-to-end supply chain. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit more about each one of them. We know the lean principles, and in fact, I'm looking forward to Young Chang's presentation tomorrow about the lean principles. But implementing lean still is a huge challenge for many large companies. But the principles for end-to-end supply chain is not as well known. And we still need to discover exactly what are the best things to do. And some of the things that we have been hearing in this conference really is showing the way of what's really coming up. But I'll explain on this a little bit more. Let me take the first one, some of the insights from the research. Let me take the first one. And, implementing lean in different operations that you have. Question, a specific question that I'm posing here is that, how do you, as an FMCG large company, implement lean in hundreds of factories spread around the globe? In a typical large company like a food company or FMCG company. Do you let each one of them do it by themselves? Is there something that comes from the center, from the headquarters? Do you sort of go into a formal program or informal program? These were the research questions that we had. To give you a little historical background, most of these large companies have started what they call their company-specific production system. Heinz production system, Bosch production system, etc., etc. And you look at this, and most of them are based on lean principles. They're a little bit different, but if you go down, they're very much the same principle. Now, it's all based on Toyota production system in the car industry, and there are many, many of them. I didn't put all of them in there. Quite a few. There's a Bosch production system. Some of the companies that are here, you could correct me if you're here and you see that in there. There is a Caterpillar, there is the DuPont, there is Kellogg. All of them have got their own production systems. When you go and study, you see that they've got some principles and everything else. I must say, for example, that the food companies have not been among among the pioneers here. We also heard this from somebody else in the earlier presentation. They have not been among the pioneers in this one here. I put some of the Nestle and a few others up there that you see. Very quickly, these lean principles really help. If you're an academic, you're a little bit cynical. You say, okay, prove it to me. Does it really help? Is there empirical evidence? And the answer is yes. There's a huge amount of empirical evidence. These production systems really, when you implement them, they help. I hope that this is agreeing with your things. This is just one example. What you see on the vertical axis is something about the performance. The higher up, the better. What you see on the horizontal axis, it is how much have they implemented lean principles. Now, those dots in this particular company, they come from a very serious formal assessment. 5 people go to the factory, stay there for 4 or 5 days, they go over about 100 different elements, they rate them, and then they add them up. There's a system that they come up with. So what you see here is, no matter where you are in the world, if you implement lean principles, you get better performance, something that we knew already. But then the question becomes, what are the explanations, if you like, about some of the ones that are in the bottom and some of the ones that are in the top? You know, why is there such a big difference between them? Some of them are slower, some of them are not as good. And there comes a lot of different explanations. But we did a few studies, but I'll choose a few of them from one of these studies to report to you today. And that one happened at Volvo. It's not a food company, but this is the study that we did. And it's not the Volvo that you guys think. It's not the Geely's Volvo. That was a car division that they sold in 1999 to Ford, and then Ford sold it to Geely, or is it Geely or Geely? They consider that to be a sort of a small division. It's the trucks and buses and construction equipment and so forth. This company has got 69 factories. Many of them are over 1,000, 1,500 people. They're all over the world, as you see. They are making all kinds of different products like this. They know Renault truck, they own Mack trucks, they make buses in India, everywhere. They're really all over the world. 120,000. They are the largest Scandinavian company, as far as I know. Right? They are. So it's a fairly large company, and we did a little research in this company for a few years. They have been, since 2007, they have been trying to implement a lean program, what they call Volvo production system, in their factories all around the world. Somehow these lean production systems, they always like a triangle or a pyramid. They also, it's the same thing that you see, that they have, very much the same things that you have seen. And if you go into the details, I think that probably Young Chan will go over these things a little bit tomorrow. But they are the basic things. I think most of the audience here knows these things, and I can talk more about them if you're interested. You know, things like 5S, which is make sure everything is uncluttered and in the right place, or total quality maintenance, or pool system, etc. They are the usual elements of a lean program. I won't really go through these things here with you. It's a question of how do you implement this thing. And of course, being Volvo, they have many different measures, performance measures, safety, reliability, delivery, cost, environment, and the effect on the people. They have, this is their system, just like many other companies that they have their own system. Now, what we did a few things. We visited 44 factories. We interviewed 200 managers. I give you the background for what I'm going to suggest to you as a research, so that you know the basis. We surveyed 312 managers in this company, factories all around the world. And Volvo very kindly gave us full access to all the historical data, which were really quite involved because they would have every assessment they would have about 400 or 500 different measurements. So there was a big Excel sheet that we could analyze. So I won't bore you with the details of, if this was an academic, I would now have to go and tell you exactly how we did the analysis. But I'll now jump to the last page. What seemed to work? Well, I chose 3 things to tell you, assuming that you guys are interested in understanding how the lean is implemented. 1, assigning dedicated team really helps. There is an argument that lean should be the responsibility of everybody. So if you assign a team, everybody is going to say, it's not my job, it's their job, let them work on it. But we found that that's not a problem. In fact, assigning a team helps. It's expensive, but it helps if you do that. Second, controlling the process is much more effective, it seems, than controlling the input or controlling the output. What I mean by this is this. Instead of putting a lot of energy in controlling the input, what is the budget, what is the amount of number of people that you're using, what's the amount of time you're taking, etc., 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 or controlling the output. Have you improved the cost? Have you improved the quality? Have you improved? Don't seem to be as effective as controlling the process. Are you meeting at 8 o'clock? Do you have a visualization like this? Do you have, what are the number of Kanban cards that you have? Really going and seeing if they're really implementing the process. That seemed to be a lot more effective than the other kinds of things. And much more, instead of sending people from top, bottom-up reporting, that seemed to help quite a bit. And finally, there are quite a few more, but I chose only 3 of them for you. Use of non-financial rewards were much better than using financial rewards. Many times, when you have, oh sorry about that, yeah. It seems to me when I talk like this, it's very loud. It's not loud? No. Okay, sorry about that. You should have told me that a little bit like that. Many times, because these lean practices save money, people say, let's give them a bonus to the workers that presented it. So this is saving us $100,000. Let's give $5,000 to the workers that presented it as an incentive. We found that that actually doesn't help as much. It's much better to do non-financial rewards. Put their names in the newspaper of the factory, or put them pictures on the wall, or give them a dinner for the family, or something, recognition like this. It seemed that when you had financial rewards, people would not share ideas. Somebody would come and say, this was my idea, he stole it, he wrote about it, and he's getting the money, why are you paying? There was a lot of stuff like this. So we, at the end, we concluded it's much better to go with non-financial rewards. Anyway, that's one thing. But there's another question. That question is this. How did this factory get here? Did it go like this? Did it go like that? In other words, that was a straight line. This one says, at the beginning, there are lots of easy ideas, low-hanging fruits. So you can improve very rapidly, but then it becomes more difficult. Or did it go like this? It says, at the beginning, there's a lot of resistance. But once the resistance is covered, it could go up a lot faster. So, sorry, this is a professor. I'm going to ask you a question. Raise your hands. How many of you do you think A? Let it be translated. Nobody. How many of you, just one at least, okay. How many of you think B? Don't worry about it. I'm not going to hold you responsible for it. B means, there's a lot of difficulty at the beginning, but then it becomes easier. B, that's a B. That's a B. That means it's very hard. That's a C. There's a very low-hanging fruits at the beginning, and then it becomes more difficult to find ideas and so forth. Let's see the hand. Let's see. Okay. How many of you think it's C? Well, none of you is correct. It's actually D. Sorry, but that's sort of, no, all of you are correct in some ways. We found that it's more like this. In fact, I gave it away, or was it a different way, you know, different pattern. So, what we found in our research is this, that it really goes more like this. You know. If you like, there are two phases. There is an exploration phase, there is an exploitation phase. I wait until that's translated into Chinese. I'm not sure how you're going to do it, it's not easy. Exploration phase, let's understand what's going on, and then once they learn it, then there's an exploitation. At least this is what we found in our research. Why is that important? Well, because you could always bring it down into different stages. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Now, why should we care about the stages? Well, because it has very direct managerial implications. While if a factory is in stage 1, what you do with it is very different than in stage 2. Let me just read some of these things here. You have to establish dedicated teams, set small improvement targets, follow progress closely, but be patient. You could not imagine how many times the CFOs would say, where's the result? Where is the result? No, and then they would sort of take it back and so forth. Once they go there, they're growing very rapidly. Then set stretch targets, completely different, and expect accelerated rate of improvement. Publicize the improvement ideas and watch for creeping complacency. People say they're improving so much. So, what is this deal that you're pushing us constantly? Once you go to this one, still you set stretch targets, but you expect the declining rate of improvement. They're operating at a high level, but the rate of improvement is not improving as fast. And finally, when you're here, they need much more budgets to do the serious overhauls. It's a very different ballgame right now. They need to leverage, the projects are more involved. And at this time, unless you leverage the capabilities of this plant in the rest of the supply chain or with the customer, beyond the factory wall, it's very difficult to justify why they should continue to do this. In other words, the investment is not going to pay off, or very easily, inside the plant. The payoff is happening elsewhere, because a customer now is willing to pay a higher margin because of the better quality or better faster delivery or whatever it is that this plant is doing that is good. There are danger zones. At this point, we cannot imagine how many times we heard from the Indians, from Chinese, from everywhere, even Germans. Oh, this is Swedish. This doesn't work for us. You know, we are different. You know, we are very, very different. We are working on very complicated stuff. You know, even the Norwegians would say the Swedes are, you know, let alone, you know, the Indians and others and so on. We are different, and usually there could be a brick wall. But if you pass the brick wall, then there's a complacency. We are doing enough. What are you pushing us so much? That could slide back. We are not getting the resources that we need. It could slide back. It could slide back very easily on this one. We saw many of them that slid back. And finally, where do we go from here? We copied everybody. No, we just have to reinvent this, and you know, all the good ideas are gone. It's quite a process for this to happen. And I think what you do at every different stage is very, very different. And most companies throw the same KPI, the same amount of resources, the same system, the same procedures as all of them. And we consider that to be very different if you start paying attention to where you are. Misplaced expectations of how quickly a lean program can improve performance and make the implementation difficult and reduce its benefits. And I thought we need to tell this, especially to the CFOs, to know. Check quickly the time. I'm going to move on. As I said, leaning, implementing lean. You could do this. I did it for a factory, but you could do it for every step. Lean does not necessarily into a supply chain because things can fall between cracks very easily. Even if it's at every step it's in practice, or I think pragmatically speaking, they could fall in between steps. It's different to making the end-to-end supply chain lean. Is a different set of challenges, most important and fundamental of which is the following. Now I'm just saying it a little bit more at the conceptual level. Inculcating, creating a culture of lean at every step is essentially a bottom-up process. Even though you do a few things on top to help, it's a bottom-up process. Whereas, to do this one, it's really a top-down process. You have to start working with different parties and really manage the interface. And that's not that simple. But that's, if you like, is the real challenge that we're talking about. And some of the things that we have been hearing about in this conference, about the IoT, about the data analysis, about the connections, is very much helping us in this. But there's more to it that we need to be careful about. Even companies admired for excellence in their lean operations, they are really working on very much on end-to-end supply chains. And I know some of them personally, and they're really working very, very hard on this. They're working on the buying side, going to the customer, or to the supplier, of the supplier, of the supplier. They don't try to buy them, or they don't try to own equity in them, but they try to understand and maybe somehow control and exchange information. And also on the selling side, all the way going to customers and retailers and everybody else. Many things to talk about. I chose a few things, even though they gave me a lot of time, but for a faculty member, there's never enough time. We always run more than what we need. So, I chose a few of them to share with you from research and other observations that I've had. Let's put them into three groups. First, relate them to how do you decode the demand, one of the biggest challenges in the supply chain. And you'll see more what I'm talking about. Second, how do you improve the responsiveness of the units? And the third is how do you reduce the complexity of the fulfillment? Very, very big challenges we are facing here. So let me first take the first one. Decoding the demand continues to be a very big challenge. And by now I knew that I needed to drink some water, so I decided I'd show you a 1-minute video. So if you don't mind watching this 1-minute video, that's good.
Peter, come take a look at this.
Look at this.
The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
Clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Wolf. We're back.
He really loves that thing.
Saw what was going on, yeah? Decoding demand, seriously, is extremely difficult. Why? Some of the best work that I have seen is done by retailers, and we are talking about food companies. These are companies that are selling your stuff. They are very sophisticated. I've seen some of them already. Of course, we have seen examples of more sophisticated concepts and ideas during this conference, but I think some of them already, these guys, have done a fantastic job on this. I'm not sure how much the food manufacturers are actually leveraging their knowledge, their know-how. This morning, the lady from Ms. Young from IBM was talking about joint ventures and working together and so forth. It's really, there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm sure some of you are already working with them. But you know, Mars of this world and other suppliers of this world could really work with suppliers and the retailers quite a bit more. It's a big challenge. And one of the fundamental ones, for example, I hope again you don't mind me talking a little bit more at the fundamental level. After all, the session is called, what is it called? Onsite Training One or something like this, which was history. So this is the part of that, I suppose. There is a demand can be very different from sales. This is a very fundamental concept. But of course, demand is not sales. Why? Well, let me take you through a very simple illustration. Let's assume I want Coke. I go to the shop. My demand for Coke is one case. I see a case, I take it. So my sales is going. Let's assume somebody else comes, wants Coke, but sees a promotion by Pepsi. Decides, oh, okay, I'm going to buy the Pepsi. So the demand for Coke was one, but the sales for Coke was 0. Let's assume now I come to buy Coke and there's no stock, there's a stock out. So I buy a Pepsi and I go. So there's a demand is 1 and sales is 0. And let's assume I go to the store to buy a 7-Up, but then I see, oh, there's a Coke in here. I'd rather buy Coke, you know, so for whatever reason. So I buy it as a substitute for 7. So this, if there was only one of them, one of each kind, then my point of sales would show 2 at the end of the day, and my demand would be 3. And since there could be any number in any one of these categories, at the end of the day, your point of sales could be a random number. Could be more, could be less, could be... So unless you have an idea about what was inside each one of these boxes. To be more systematic about this, you want to know what was sales. The demand is equal to sales. Sales of a substitute product. No sales due stock out, or sales as a substitute product. So, and sales as a substitute product. I'm sorry, I'm not used to holding this microphone in front of my ears. If it bothers you at times, please let me know and I try to be more careful. So, this is what we like to know. All the big data, all the IoTs, many of the things, some of the things they have to be able to tell us would be at the end something like this. Exactly what happened, because this is a very critical information for us to know. What was the demand? Now, what do we do? How do we do that? Well, some of the ideas would be we have to wait for the IoT to come and tell us, or that's clearly that helps. But what are the companies that have been operating up to now been doing? Well, let me go to one of them, and I consider them to be the world champion for doing this. You know this company, and it's the largest convenience store in the world. 56,000 of them, 7-Eleven, Japan. They also have got 7-Elevens in the US, about 8,000 of them, that belongs to 7-Eleven Japan in Japan. The ones in the US, for good variety of reasons, are not as sophisticated, but the ones in Asia and in Scandinavia, they are very sophisticated, and they have been doing this for many, many years. Let me give you a few things about what they do, and how they actually get a lot more information, visibility about their demand. They have invested very aggressively in extracting information. We were talking about cognitive information and everything. These guys really have been doing it for years. They have 58 million visits on average per day, 2015. And they consider every one of them to be a source of information and doing something about and harvesting that information. They have been working big data since 1980s. They have been investing more than anything. They had their own ISDN lines and everything else in the 1980s, not in the last few years. In Japan, 19,000 of them. They track hourly sales. Hourly sales. So, they can tell product B started to sell when product A was sold out. Let's say they have ordered 2 types of sandwiches, ham sandwich and egg sandwich. 100 sandwiches each. They come, they know by 10 o'clock the egg sandwich was sold out, and then the ham sandwich started to sell. So they now know the ham sandwich was the substitute for the egg sandwich. Just imagine, you have to know exactly what time it started, the hourly sale, track them, and then do the analysis to figure out things like this. They do a lot of that kind of analysis, which obviously I don't have time to take you through, but they're really, I'll show you a few more, the sort of things that they do. They have fantastic point of sales data. Apparently when you go there, they say, okay, this guy is about 30 and 40, well, he's not very rich, you know, is male or female, is he a student, is he a worker, depending on where they are. How often does he come? Is he drunk? Is he, all of that goes into when they're selling you. The average sales is about $6, 600 yen in a 7-Eleven in Japan, which is about 30–40% more than their very good competitors. And they make more profit, by the way, than their competitors. They track of the weather, they track of many things that we have been hearing about in this conference. When did they buy this sandwich? Was it raining or not raining? And therefore, was that really having an effect on what they buy or not buy? And then they spend enormous amount of resources to turn the data into actionable intelligence. You have heard this throughout the conference. But this company is an example of having done this and reaping benefits from this. Just to give you one example, they have several hundred, last year there was about 1,700. Just imagine, 1,700 people. That's a lot of people, which they call operations field counselors. They travel to Tokyo every 2 weeks to get the latest analysis of the data, and then they go back to their own regions so that they could talk to their 40 or 50 franchise stores that are managed by them, or at least not managed, are sort of there to talk to them. Here's a company that has been investing in IT, in digital information since 1980s, but still spent so much money on human interaction with the data and to communicate the tacit know-how. It doesn't rely on Excel sheets and completely on that. So it gives you some indications of what is needed, and maybe the human-machine interaction that we have been hearing, I think you can see the example of it in a company like this. I like this quotation from Mr. Suzuki, who is the CEO. Data without intelligence is dangerous. And he sort of invested in that. Sorry, why I have to watch the time, right? Big data is helping these companies in a big way. Let me give you one other example. Again, you have been hearing about this all along in this conference, and I think it's useful to see some more examples of it. This one comes from Tesco. They have about 1,200 stores. These are the people that's selling your stuff, food manufacturers. One of the analysis they did, they found out that in the summer, the first time the temperature goes up by 10 degrees centigrade, they sell 300% more barbecue meat, 45% more lettuce, 50% more coleslaw, and 25% less Brussels sprouts. I don't know why, but that's what happens. Just imagine if you've got 1,200 stores and this happens, how many shortages, how many overstocks, and everything else you would have. So how important this information is. And it's not just the weather. It's, for example, this one, again, another example I chose. This is for the lettuce salad, the lettuce salads that they sell. How they sell it with the temperature. Is this making a lot of noise in your... Oh, okay, good. How much they're selling, what happens during the Easter, what happens during the school holidays, what happens with the promotion. So they're keeping this. And they, for example, they find out the second heat wave, it is not the same as the first heat wave. So it's about 15% less. All of this, you can see there's no end to how much data you could get and analyze. And these people have been doing it for 30 years. And by the way, they want to work, many of them that I've seen. They want to work with the manufacturers because they need them. They need their suppliers to be able to agile and to help them. And sometimes the manufacturers are not ready or have got everything that they need to be able to do it. Vendor managed inventory many times helps. Most people here know what that is. That's when the seller is managing the inventory of the buyer. So they would know exactly what's going on to that inventory. There's a big line of communication between them. And many of the smart FMCGs are doing this. For example, Unilever. Do we have anybody from Unilever here? I just want to be sure that I don't say anything that is not correct. You're from Unilever, huh? Yeah? Well, if you see anything wrong, let me know. They are working, they say, with all of these companies, trying to come up with systems so that they can react a lot faster and better with them. I chose one of the examples because this one was happening in China. And I hope that they are right because this is from their documents. I don't have personal experience on this. Apparently, before, they were, metro stores would get the stuff from the Unilever distribution centers. So Unilever came and said, listen, let me manage your distribution centers. So it's your distribution centers, but I manage it. It's almost like a vendor managed inventory. And apparently, lots of good things happened. So just two of the good things that happened. The number of invoices went down by about 95%, and the number of orders went down by about 75%. You can imagine that's a lot of savings that they could have as a result of this. In fact. Deeper involvement with the retailer is also helping them a lot with the rejuvenation of the products that we have been hearing about a lot in this conference. They have got 1,200, the average store is about 1,200 square feet, 120 square meters. Very small, the average store. Only 2,800 stock keeping units, SKUs. So they are very, very careful about every inch of that. And as soon as something starts not to sell as much, they discard it and they take something new. These numbers are amazing to me. 70% new items every year in a grocery store, selling toothpaste. And, you know, in the US, people think that the hot dog that has been in the 7-Eleven has been rolling there for the last 3 weeks, you know, but this one, they really seem to be doing it constantly. 100 new products per week. This is an amazing pace to bring in new products. Let me just give you one example from this noodle. Just out of many things, it's something that you probably never pay attention to. This is the way they have introduced the noodles from their file there. You know, they start and they discontinue. They start another one. They start another one. So, and this is only one out of many items that they do. So this rejuvenation is huge, and they work very closely with them. So they get the information very, very quickly. They have joint product development. For example, with Asahi, they developed a premium beer in can. Usually premium beers are in bottles, but they used the data from 7-Eleven to see if they could. This apparently worked. They decided to do it. They developed teas together, so they 7-Eleven sees that people are buying wet noodle soups, so they go to the manufacturer and say, could you produce a few more varieties? And there's a lot of information like that that they do. They are fantastic in using the qualitative data, quantitative data, sorry, as well as I said, once they have analyzed it, to use the qualitative methods to take it to the people that can do something with this information. Now, the big challenge that again we have seen in this conference is how do you translate or transfer the qualitative data, the rich data that is still there, and you don't really capture even with the fancy things of 7-Eleven's, fancy checkout counters of 7-Eleven. So, where do we go to learn on this one here? You guys might know something more than I do. Many of them are food companies. Many of them are very sophisticated. But who is very good in using the qualitative data from the customer and implementing it and taking actions on that? This is quite a challenge, quite a serious managerial challenge. I don't know enough about a food company, but I know about another company, which I think they are the best in the world in doing this. They are not in the food business, but they are in FMCG. And that is Inditex, that own Zara, that you guys probably know. They are very, very good at this. And I have again had personal privilege of working with this company for about 13, 14 years. I go to La Coruña, there's Spaniards and so forth. But I tell you a few things about them. There's really so much one can learn from them. And you could see how they're going to be so much more in advance in using the projections that we have been hearing in this conference. Just to give you a rough idea, they produce about 18,000 plus new models, new things, new products, which translates into about 500,000 new SKUs per year. Because there are 5-6 colors and 5-6 sizes to every shirt, to every things and so forth. So about 30 different variations. So we are talking about 500,000 new SKUs. It's not even old ones, new SKUs. It's fascinating to see how they can manage this. Let me just say that they are the largest apparel company in the world now. They're bigger than Gap, bigger than very sophisticated industry, this one. Benetton, Gap, H&M, all of them are very, very good. But these guys came from behind and now they're number one. And make more money than all of them. More money than each one of them. They are, see, this is one of their stores, I'm sure you have been to their stores. It's very uncluttered, and they don't even have room for inventory in these stores. And they are usually in very expensive places. The average store is about 1,500 square meters. A very expensive place, like on Queens Road in Hong Kong. No, they are in Manhattan on the 32nd, on the 42nd and 5th Avenue. You can't go to more expensive places than this. Or on Champs-Élysées in Paris. And they are just selling apparel. They are not selling iPhone or some serious new technological invention. They're just doing some simple stuff. Well, I should also tell you that Mr. Ortega, who started this company about 30 years ago, 1975, he has been the richest man. He started with 30 pesos. He didn't have any money. He was very poor. At the age of 13, 14, he started, but the Zara, he started with $30, 30 euros, and has been the richest man in Spain for many years, richest man in Europe for many years, and is now the second richest man in the world because of this company. For a few minutes, for a few seconds, 2 months ago, he was the richest man in the world because the stock market of Microsoft went down a little bit, and then it came back up again. So Bill Gates was number 2 for about a few seconds, and then it's back up. He's ahead of Warren Buffett, he's ahead of Carlos Slim, all of these guys that you have heard of. Terry Gao of Foxconn, he's ahead of all of them. And he made it from this one. Well, let me just give you quickly. Since I started working with them, their sales was 3.25, and now it's 29, about 6.5 times their sales have grown, and profits have grown about 8.5 times. In other words, they are not becoming even more efficient, but they also managed to charge a higher margin because their profit is growing faster than their sales. And they are really quite big right now, $20 billion, $21 billion company. And they have been opening up new stores constantly. This is only Zara. Oh, sorry, this is in the text. 88 countries, about 7,000 stores, 140,000 people. It's a big company that they're growing like this. I thought you might be interested. They have been opening, on average, more than 1 new stores every day in the last decade. China alone was one store per day for a while. So, where do they get the money? You need a lot of money to do this. But I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. They get the money from their supply chain. They don't have to pay for procurement for a stock. They can turn it into cash so fast that they don't need, the faster they grow, the more money they have. They have what they call a negative working capital, but this means that they generate cash from their capital. Instead of needing cash to grow, they can generate more cash. And that's only because of their supply chain, that they're so fast in doing this. Design, production, distribution, and turning it into money so quickly. Oh, you see that in there, you know. The payables is 4 billion, the inventory is 2 billion, receivables is that, so they get 1.72 billion from this. They carry less inventory, that's the green one, than their competitors. So they're doing extremely well on the supply chain. They're hoarding cash, about sitting on $5.3 billion right now. And remember, this is Spain that had a lot of problems in Spain. They really had seen it. Now they're good, but they had a lot of problems. But you didn't even see any dip in the way they were opening new stores in Spain. That's somehow the problem in Spain don't seem to be touching them. What do? They collect enormous number of qualitative information from there, and also quantitative, but qualitative. Store manager's job is to provide information to La Coruña. So how do you do this? It's not that simple. 7,000 stores or 2,000 stores around the world. How do you get that information? Well, that's where some of the beauty of this qualitative systems structures come in. They send it to this room, several of these rooms. This is a room that is very, very interesting. Well, these people are sitting there. Some of them are marketing, salespeople. Some of them are production people. And in the corners, you see right there, they are the designers. If I show it schematically, it looks, they're all sitting next to each other, very close to each other. It's more like this. So these people are constantly in touch with stores. Each one of them is about 40, 50 stores. On the phone, on Skype, there's a lot of communication like that. Of course, also with iPad and stuff like that. They are, production people are there, designers are there. They have their own prototype shop in every room. They have 4 of these rooms in La Coruña. And they can do very quick communication. There is, you know, we saw that there's no prima donnas. There's just no design prima donnas like Versace or Prada or anything like that. There's just design. And there's a lot of communication between them. This is one of the prototype shops. They can do design to rack from the time that they like something to being on the rack in one of their shops in 2 weeks if they want to. In an industry that right now, the stores that you have in Shanghai probably, and also in New York, everywhere, they have to order for their winter, 6 months from now. They can do it in 2 weeks. Apparently, Madonna had a concert in Spain, and she had a very nice blouse on, By the time she finished the tour, they had some version of that blouse hanging in their stores. And they could react so quickly. They could design it, make it, ship it, hang it on the store. It's just really phenomenal. And I could take you through a lot of details that they work on. Technology is there, but it's not just technology. It's a lot of structure, a lot of organization, a lot of systems that they have that is really very, very important. For example, you see this lady here standing there, is showing the design to everybody. Could this work in Miami Beach? Could this work in China? Could this work in Saudi? Because they have stores in Riyadh or in Dubai, and so they get the comments quickly like that. Because they're sitting in the same place, they don't have to spend 2 hours, 5 days to just arrange a meeting. They could just make the part, the prototype, come and show it. Can you make it for $100? Can you sell it for $120? Can we do it in the next 2 months? Because if you do it in 5 months from now, it's not good. All of those answers could be done very, very quickly. Just to give you again something personally, I'm not supposed to show you these pictures, but this is a picture from their prototype shop. I was there in October, and I went to London, and the same coat is hanging there. You go to these shops and say, can I have this coat? No, sorry, we're out of it. Could you make another one? No, they're working on the next season. But while the coat is hanging on the shop, they were working on it on the design shop, and they were still improving it. Somebody says, this pocket is too tight, they can do something about it. Or this zipper doesn't work, they can do something about it. Are you guys very tired? I mean, aren't you, do you need a break? All right. You're adorable. I can't sit there for 1 hour and listen to a faculty member. But anyway, improving responsiveness. How do you improve responsiveness? Again, huge amount of, everybody is talking about it. But what do these guys do, which is interesting? They do something that I've seen also in other very, very good companies. I just jump into it. Many people think responsiveness, you really need a lot of inventories. But as we have been hearing it, it really has got problem. Inventories creates bullwhip effect, all kinds of things that is not, and it's expensive. And in this industry, the inventories are the worst things because everybody is discounting because they make big mistakes. We all depend on their mistakes. We all wait for the sale because we are not going to buy it until they admit they made a mistake and they have to reduce the margins. So we go and buy it then. Something like about 60. The average retailer in this industry, at least 2 years ago, was getting about 60 to 70% of the initial selling price because of all the discounts that there is. Zara would take about 85% to 90%. I mean, that 15% difference in the margin is enough to pay for a lot of stuff. But most companies don't realize it. That's about twice the margin for the profit for the entire company on the sales. But anyway. Well, I just jumped into one of the things that I think probably is controversial and probably most valued to you that I've seen in this company and also elsewhere. They are not very keen on using them, sweating their assets. This is strange. We have been hearing about sweating your assets, extract the last ounce out of them, etc. and so forth. They're not very keen on this. They're much more worried about the margin. Now, how do you make everybody in the supply chain to worry about the margin? It's not that simple. They're very good to make everybody worry about the cost, but not about the margin. They seem to have a system of working on the margin. Anyway, let me show you a little bit more. If you want to follow this, especially in food and beverage industry, 3 of them that I've worked with, it's really a big cultural change. Because I have seen most factories in food and supply chain are generally, they're used with OEE, overall equipment efficiency, total line efficiency, many efficiency things. That means these are not the most important measures. They are important, but not the You don't kill yourself for that. And I go many times in factories for the food industries that they really, OEE is such an incredibly important thing. So everything has to sacrifice for that. So you come and say, I want a batch of this. Listen, if I want to do it, I have to do this new setup, I have to do this, I can't change the line, I can't do all of that, and it's going to kill my OEE, my overall equipment efficiency. Because this is the amount of time that I had available, I should have produced so much, and I'm not going to produce so much. So anyway, well, I thought I had a few charts to show you how they do it, but I just jumped into the logic. I was worried about the time at this time. The logic is very clear. Again, this is a little bit parenthesis as an academic. It comes from proven theories, which is the queuing theory. Responsiveness slows at higher levels of capacity utilization. We know this from the highway. If you put too many cars, every car slows down. We know it from the checkout counter. We know it from everything. But somehow we sort of forget it when it comes to running a factory. In other words, if I can show it just an illustration, if you increase the capacity utilization, I mean, there's queuing models, formulas, that I decided not to bore you with the formulas, but there's an alpha, beta, mu, gamma, delta in there, so I don't want to give it, but this is the result. As you increase the capacity utilization, the responsiveness deteriorates. But the last bit really makes it terrible. It's very non-linear. It is not linear. It's very non-linear at the end. We all sort of realize this. I mean, it's because it's related to capacity utilized to capacity unutilized. So you're going to 95%, your denominator is very small. Then it becomes a very large. You go to 99%, it becomes very, very small. It really explodes. Operations managers know this, but many others, they don't know this. We need to schedule it, well anyway, let's not worry about this part here. They don't like to do last minute changes. And the other part of it is, the more variability you have, the more customized, the more e-commerce, the more want stuff that really creates variability in demand or supply, the earlier this point of ascent starts. So if you're here and you want to maintain the same response rate, you better be prepared with a little bit less capacity utilization. Otherwise, you're in a different curve. And everybody is going to be, you're not going to be able to respond. So, you need more buffer capacity when you're there. I decided to also make the quotation for Union Chief Supply Chain Officer. When we have extra capacity in our factories, we ask what they can do to serve the market better and expand their offering, instead of forcing them to remove extra capacity. I mean, it's a very big cultural change here. What can you do to use this capacity to serve the market better? You better change the KPI for that. If you ask them that, and then you say, I'm going to hold you responsible for overall operating efficiency, it's unfair. That doesn't work. People are smart enough to realize that's just a talk. Then the KPI has to change too. They have more buffer capacity than at every stage. Let me give you one example for Zara. This is the first warehouse, 500,000 square meters. Very fancy. They brought people from Denmark to do the system for them. They brought Toyota to help them for moving the stuff to in their hangars, with the hangars, all the material handling system. There's a Toyota material handling system company that does these things. They have got very, very fancy stuff. I'd like you to think about 500,000 square meters. 500, that's about 70 football fields. It's 5 stories, but it's huge. And when in 2001 we were there, 2002, they were operating at about 50% capacity. About 4 days of the week was 24 hours, and the other 3 days was not 24 hours, 8 hours and so forth. And at that time, they decided they're going to build another one. 2003. They built it actually in 2003. 190,000 square meters in Zaragoza for about $120 million. So instead of waiting for the capacity to be reached, they are already committed to it, and they started building it. They built a third one because they have been growing so much in Madrid, near Madrid, for another 150 million euros. They are constantly ahead in their capacity of space, of machinery, but not the people, because the people, you can't keep extra capacity. So they use subcontractors for sewing and a few other tricks that they use to do this. So they have, for the factors of production, they use more buffer capacity. Yes, I don't know if you can see this picture. Higher capacity utilization sometimes saves money, but not always, you know, sometimes you really run into trouble here. But maybe the thing that you want to remember is this little triangle. If you are working in a very stable environment, okay, push the capacity utilization. But if indeed there's a lot of variability into your supply and in your demand, and you know your production systems and everything else, at every step, trucking, warehousing, etc., then you better be prepared for a little bit more buffer capacity. Otherwise, you're going to be on that curve and it would be very, very low. The argument is not, gee, you're at 80% capacity. Couldn't you do a little bit more, 5% more? Yeah, the 5% is going to probably be way up there. That's the argument that I would say many times people in outside operations, outside production, it's very hard for them to understand. And by the way, this is true for the capacity of the railways, and capacity of ships, capacity of ports. That's really, it's very important to remember this little chart here. Maybe this is the word I want to leave with you. Maximizing capacity utilization of a system does not always increase output, service, and ultimately financial performance. Sometimes it doesn't even increase the output. Think about the highway. If you use the capacity of the highway too much, every car slows down. In fact, ultimately they all stop. No, not even one car can go through. But whereas if you were operating at 60%, 50, 70% capacity, all the cars are going at 60 miles an hour. Now the last one, reducing the complexity of the fulfillment. There are many things here. We are making this, it's becoming very, very complex. And of course, we come up with fancier models, which are very important. And I'm sure Luke is going to talk about some of these models, optimization and so forth. Extremely important. All the IoT, big data and so forth are important. But every supply chain manager that I know is also looking for how to reduce the complexity. What do you do to reduce the complexity of these things? Big, big challenge. I'll leave you only with one idea, and that is what I have seen in a few supply chains, and that is create a transparent rhythm in the supply chain. By that, I mean something that is regular. For example, Zara trucks leave La Coruña 8:30 in the morning for Nice. If a truck is full, empty, less than truckload, doesn't matter. It's like a bus schedule. Or, you know, the shipment to the store is going to arrive on Thursdays between 2 and 4. Actually, twice per week. Everywhere in the world, I'll show it to you in one chart here. So there's a very transparent rhythm. So they know the truck is going to be in Rotterdam on Thursday afternoon, so they can tell their suppliers in China to send the stuff that we have ordered to get to Rotterdam on Thursday noon, so that the truck, when it's 5 o'clock, is coming back to La Coruña, can put the stuff on it and don't come back empty. And they don't need a fancy system for that. They just say every Thursday that's what's going to happen. So people know, and people plan on it. In fact, there are many examples like this you could think of. It's really the idea of the takt time. Again, started with Toyota. When do you move things so that you don't do rush and wait, and so forth, and make it very clear so that everybody knows that in about a minute another car is going to come. You don't need a fancy IT system to tell you. You know that in about 2 days from now, the shipment is going to arrive. So I think you follow what I'm saying there. 7-Eleven again, you can see it very easily. They have many different products. So the rhythm is very clear. How often they receive shipments, cold shipments, hot shipments, etc., etc. Zara, they are really ritualist, very, very, what shall I say, almost religious about this. And I've always asked, how come, why twice per week everywhere in the world? From La Coruña, right there, shipments. They say, why don't you send it to China once a week or once every 2 weeks, to Barcelona twice a week? Okay, but they can save maybe $30 million in shipment. And by the way, they ship stuff only air and trucks. No trains, no ships. I mean, this is for stuff that goes from La Coruña to their stores. And they are, it's expensive. And they ship, by the way, some of their garments on hangers. So, just imagine, they're shipping hangers, coats, by air to Tokyo or to Shanghai twice per week. This is, you look at this, this is totally crazy. But then they say, no. They really believe in this rhythm, and they don't want to make it, in Argentina we do it once a week, in Europe we do it twice a week. No, everywhere in the world is twice per week, even though they have grown so much. So I'm learning from them, and I would not have believed that this doesn't make sense, but somehow I think at the end of the day, they know something that obviously we academics don't know. And in my opinion, that is the clear, transparent rhythm in the supply chain that reduces your need for a lot of information that would have to be. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, it just makes it easier. It reduces the complexity a little bit. I think I'm going to try to wrap it up. You guys look very tired, so I'm going to start wrapping it up very quickly. Let me summarize. Leading FMCG companies are implementing lean programs at every step of their supply chain, and I'm talking about every step. I just talked to you about the factory. And some of the lessons for that: performance improves in the pattern of an S shape, dedicated teams help, focusing more on controlling the process is better than controlling the input or the output, and non-financial rewards are better than financial rewards, as I was talking about. And on the second part, a few suggestions about this. Decode the demand, and obviously the best way is to integrate deeper and deeper in downstream operations, and make that a job of the downstream operation to give you the information to upstream operation. Downstream, upstream, of course I'm talking about the suppliers all the way to the customers. Improve the responsiveness, and I just leave you one idea, there are many others. Reduce the weight of capacity utilization if you can. That's going to be important. In other words, people that come up with very fancy machines, some of those robots that we saw probably, they say it has to work 24/7 to pay off. But actually this company is the reverse. It says, if anything, the machinery and the space, I could utilize it less. But the people, I've got to utilize them 100%. So everything is very, very different. for them when they think about how to make their supply chains responsive. And by the way, making the supply chain responsive has paid off for them. They're making more money, and they don't even need the money from others, from the bankers. They could generate their own cash. And finally, reducing the complexity, creating a rhythm. If you can create a rhythm, it makes it a little bit easier for people to. It's one idea for reducing the complexity. There are, of course, other ideas too. I think this is the last one. That's the last one.
Thanks, Pastor. Very useful results. 下边呢，我们给大家一些互动的时间，大家如果有问题可以来问 Pastor。好。
Really appreciate Professor Sasha. This is one of, I say, best lean training for me. My question is, you talk about the supply chain need agility, from reactive to proactive, and customer centricity. That's why. So now in China, we have e-commerce is very growing, very fast. So we have a lot of challenge on e-commerce. They don't have clear forecast, the demand, not like 1-0. They can one day sell your, for example, 1 quarter or half year volume. So how we can do that? We still can keep our other channel, the service, also keep our cost competitiveness, and we could also have quality triangle. So that's my question.
Sorry, I didn't get the exact question. I understood everything that you said, but the question itself.
The question is how we use, like give any advice or solution, how we, find the whole end-to-end supply chain solution to adapt, e-commerce channel challenge.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That's a great, that's really a big challenge. Let me also say for some of these companies as well. Let me talk maybe quickly about how Zara is doing it, because Zara is now in 28 countries offer e-commerce. They didn't do it before. Probably the answer is what we have heard. Every company has to come up with a very imaginative solution. What Zara has done, because their system is so good, they didn't want to create any problem for that system, in my opinion. They have now created stores. This is for global distribution now. Stores that they treat e-commerce as another store in every country. So what happens is that they have now a store, which they call a depot store, which is not really a store. It's really a DC, a distribution. It's a warehouse. And what happens is that all the data that was sent anywhere is sent to that store, to that place. They either ship it to the brick and mortar shop for them to come and pick it up, or they can ship it to the customer in that country. In other words, they're using their existing structure to accommodate the e-commerce. Now, how long can they do it? And when it becomes very big, would they still do it? Is a different problem. But it is exactly like that. It's almost like another store. So if somebody has got 40 stores in China, this will be the 41st store. Maybe in certain countries, I think in China they have probably 2 or 3 of them. I'm not sure, because of the size of the country. In Costco, they don't have Costco here, but this is one thing that I'm going to, I don't know if you know Costco, the company that is selling low-cost items, like a warehouse. They sell it to you in pallets, and you go and get things in big things. They have it in Korea. They're very, very successful. But I understand they have started in China without any brick and mortar, just the e-commerce part of it. They are going to use, again, something in their existing system to do it. I guess the answer to it is that I honestly don't know how to do it. It's a huge challenge, and it seems to be case by case. I don't know of any formulas or any structural, any organized system that says this is the way you should do it. It's really as they say it in the US, it's a monkey wrench into many of these existing systems. It probably is easier for people that come from e-commerce to brick and mortar than people that come from brick and mortar that go to e-commerce, because there's also movement that direction too. It's much more difficult. Sorry, I don't know the answer.
好，下一位。
Well, in school, we always encourage to challenge professors, so here we go. With a given factor, we don't see, first of all, we don't see many 7-Eleven stores here. Second, with the mental state, you mentioned that what worked in the US, worked in Spain and Japan, might not work in China, second. Third one, talk about what David just mentioned about the e-commerce, that even we, for the CMG company, they work with the e-commerce channel, the JD.com, they don't willing to share these data, the sales data, which you cannot get it. Fourth, I don't think unless you encourage every food and beverage manufacturer to invest heavily on the IT part like Zara. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to get in that stage. So I was going to ask you if you have experience to help the Chinese food and beverage company to achieve that stage as lean operation and also supply chain. And I think usually we'd like to get some takeaway points from professors. So please, thank you.
On the lean side, on the supply chain side, you're right about the e-commerce challenge again. And I wish I knew more about China to tell you if it works or not, but many years of experience in many countries, including, let's say, places, really difficult places like India, several years, and Africa for several years, have taught me that many of these principles really are much more applicable than most people give it a try. I know that many people don't agree with that. Some of my best colleagues from business don't agree with it. They think that the culture trumps the systems many times. But I am not really sure about that. I think that there are some principles that are really universal. Now, coming back to the lean, I really have seen this. We write research papers and all that. We do a lot of research. There is controversy on this, and there is disagreement among people that write papers about this. I belong to the people, to the group that says many of the lean ideas are applicable everywhere. It just, okay, there are some adjustments to be made, but you go 2 or 3 layers down, it's the same thing. It's almost like the religions. They're all saying the same things, you know. You just have to go down a few steps to see that this is the same fundamental thing that there is. If you stay at the certain level, yeah, there's a difference with it. But you go, yeah, okay, you want uncluttered place. You want something for everything. You want right the first time and so forth. There's a little bit of adjustment that you have to do. Can just-in-time work in China with unreliability of it? Okay, you put a few more compound cards in it. But the idea still works, and just take the compound cards one at a time. So, and the same thing for many, many other ideas that apply, in my opinion, everywhere. I mean, including, let's say, probably can safely say, like a country like Senegal. You go there, boy, it's difficult. But still, okay, they are not as sophisticated with the IoT, but many of the ideas of lean are absolutely applicable. In fact, they need it even more, in my opinion, than the countries that are in Europe and the US.
Okay, 这位先生。
Thank you very much. It's eye-opening. I do have one question linked with Zara, the operation model, and it's very, like maybe every 2 weeks they can put a new product in the market. How do they measure the success of their new initiatives, new product? I see their operation model is they do the development work centrally, right? But the consumer are different in all over the world. How do they really take the quality, like like my R&D is in US. They don't understand Chinese consumer very well. So what's the tricks they will do differently? Really can capture global needs and to turn the initiative successfully.
Very insightful question. It's actually not what you think it is. The idea is this: let's try many products and see which one catches fire. So we don't have to we can afford to let go of many of them. Why? Because the whole system is designed. First of all, they make very small batches. I can talk about some of the other things. They don't make big batches, things that they don't do. That is very difficult in many companies. They make small, so their system is designed so that they can make a small batch. And there's always 5,000 people around the world that want a pink leather jacket, which looks awful. But they can always sell it, because they can always also ship it from one store to another, because they manage all the inventory in all their stores. I mean, there are other tricks. Inventory in the store doesn't belong to the store manager. People like Arunia control the inventory. They control pricing, they control discount, they control promotion, everything. I mean, it's not that they tell them what to do, they have to be discussed together. So because there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of qualitative. So the answer to your question is, how successful the new product is judged by the fact that these guys have become the biggest apparel company in the world, and they are making more money every time. Every year they have made more money making more. So it is not the individual product. In other words, they have made the consequence of making a mistake very low cost. If a company has to make 100,000 of this leather jacket, every time it wants to make a leather jacket, it's a big amount of money, big investment. So you can't afford to have too many of them. But if you're making 5,000 of them, you try the pink, you try the purple, and you try all kinds of different variations and see which one wins. And the one that wins, you make more. And they're ready to react. It is not like the others, things that, okay, they're working on the next season. They can react. What is fascinating to me, again, talking very fundamentally, instead of putting all their energy trying to forecast and trying to have all kinds of games to make sure things are very good, they have decided to put that money into making their systems adaptable and responsive. Now, exactly what it takes a few years to do this. It's not that it's very clear what to do, but that's the direction. And of course, Mr. Ortega says, how many of them say this? I want 5 hands touching production, 5 hands touching the customers. And I don't want to keep my eyes off until it goes from there to the customer. That's an interesting philosophy to me. You just have to make it happen.
Okay, it's time to tea break. Let's thanks Kasra.